Hello and welcome to our London History Podcast, where we share our love of London, its people, places and history. It's designed for you to learn things about London that most Londoners don't even know. I am your host, Hazel Baker, qualified London tour guide and CEO and founder of londonguidedwalks.co.uk. Each episode is supported by show notes, transcripts, photos and further reading, all to be found on our website. Click on londonguidedwalks.co.uk, podcast, and then select the episode that you fancy. And if you enjoy what we do, then you'll love our guided walks and private tours that we offer throughout the year. So get that cup of tea, put your feet up, and enjoy. We've done it. We have reached triple digits, with this being our 100th episode. In 2022 alone, we have produced over 500 minutes of new, unique content. That's 82% more than other creators in the society and culture category. We have listeners in 67 countries, so hello to all of you. And we are in the top 10% of shared podcasts globally. We're also in the top 5% of most followed podcasts. If you don't follow us, then you can do. Click on subscribe, totally free, in Apple or Google Podcasts, and of course in Spotify. You can also go to our website, londonguidedwalks.co.uk/podcast. Enter your email there, and we'll send you an email when a new episode is ready for you to listen to. Our London History podcast is scoring 4.85 out of 5. So if you haven't rated our podcast, you can do so, and do that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I really love reading your comments. This episode, we take a moment to reflect on the origins of the words we often use and hear during this festive period. If you're looking for a way to get your history and language fix all in one go, then stick around. We'll look at how some words such as Christmas and Yuletide first entered our vocabulary, as well as exploring other words associated with Christmas, that of food and drink, and also in songs. To help us navigate through these Christmas words is Danny Bate, a PhD student at the University of Edinburgh, someone who specialises in historic linguistics. He's interested in Philology, which is the study of language in oral and written historical sources. Hello, Danny.
Hello. Hi, Hazel. Thank you so much for having me.
Not at all. I've been looking forward to this one because it's a little bit different, isn't it?
Yes, you could say that. I think it is a bit different, but different in a good way.
One of the things when I'm doing my tours is people are absolutely fascinated by languages. You know, how things have changed when we're talking about maybe Shakespeare, or how certain street names have got their names, or indeed areas of London as well. And of course, it's Christmas time. Ho, ho, ho. So it makes sense for us to have a look at some Christmas-themed vocabulary. So I think, what do you think about starting with the actual word of Christmas?
It's a perfect place to start, so it makes sense to start at the beginning. It is a very good place to start. No, Christmas is a wonderful word. It is a fascinating word, a word with a very rich history within English. And also, in a sense, it's our word, us being English speakers. Other languages have their own words with a different history and a different formation to them. So Christmas is, you could call it a truly English word.
So where do we get, I mean, obviously there's the Christ and the Mass, but how is it, how have we come to create that word?
Yeah, it has a long history. So it's been a part of the language since Old English times. Old English being the earliest stage of the language. It was by no means the only competitor within the field of Christmassy words at that early stage. Probably not too surprising, the competition in Old English was Yule, which still survives today as Yule. And the Scandinavian languages, if people know some Swedish or Danish or Norwegian, so things like Yule, it has become the default word in those particular languages, but not the case within English. And in English, Christmas has won out. Nice and deconstructable as words go. First part of it is Christ. Second part of it is Mass. Mass being, the act of worship, especially, within Roman Catholicism and within medieval England. So it's the Mass of Christ, really.
So is that more focusing on the service at the time rather than the actual day or period, 12 days of Christmas? Where
that's a good point. It really does stem from the particular service, and maybe the reason why Christmas comes to dominance and comes to oust words that may refer to the day in general, or even to the season, like Yuletide does, which refers to a kind of a longer time of year. Christmas is specifically religious, a single religious event that then gets extended, as the religious event of the year gets extended, and it starts to include other things like the day after Christmas, the 12 days of Christmas leading up to Epiphany. It becomes the default word for the whole celebration. I could speculate that perhaps this is to tie it into other days of the year, sort of as a way of demarcating the calendar. So in the same way, we also have things like Michaelmas, but really it's sort of primarily a religious term that has burst its boundaries and now refers to the whole festival rather than just the religious service that people would go to on that day.
When was the first time we see the word Christmas being used?
Ooh, good question. As far as I know, it's within Old English sources. So we're talking, the Old English period is, roughly up until the year 1100. So in late Old English, I think we get the first examples of it. And there it really is like a compound phrase rather than a compound word. It really is the Christ's Mass. It looks like a more complicated thing than just this Christmas that we have today, this kind of short and snappy word. And then we kind of see it flourishing from that point onwards.
Don't you think it's a little bit strange? Because we still have the Yule log that would be put on the fire. We have a Christmas log, but that's a cake, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's funny, but words compete. Words can easily compete and try and, jostle with each other down the centuries. And in this particular case, it makes perfect sense to me that to solve this argy-bargy between two words, we should maybe try and specialize them. We distinguish them and use them in certain contexts and certain phrases. That's quite usual. Yule log and Christmas log is, it makes sense to me.
I know which one I prefer to eat.
Yes, me too.
Now, last week's episode was all about the royal Christmas message. And we have a very particular saying of saying Merry Christmas rather than Happy Christmas, or indeed Happy Holidays. Where does that come from?
Well, that's an interesting one. We have this Christmas message, and I think it's extremely appropriate that, at least in the UK and perhaps other Commonwealth countries, we have the monarch's Christmas message, which is televised on TV. Extremely appropriate, and I have no idea whether His Majesty King Charles is aware of this, but message is related to Christmas. It's a long story as to why it may be and somewhat speculative, but it does seem that both the mess in message and the mass in Christmas go back to a Latin word which means to send. So in the idea, the message, perhaps that's a bit more obvious. It's the message is something that's sent. But even mass, strange word, seems to come from the last word of the Latin mass, which, or the last phrase in this particular example, is something like ite missa est, go, it is the dismissal, like the service is over, go home. And for some reason, that word in the final phrase comes to refer to the Mass in general. So there's a nice little detail there that the Christmas message and Christmas message, we've got two little word siblings side by side there.
Fantastic. And where does the merry? I mean, we Brits have bad reputation with alcohol or the consumption of.
Really?
What I mean, we got Joyous Noel, we got Feliz Navidad. When you translate them, they're happy, they're joyous, whereas we have merry. Is which kind of merry are we really talking about?
That's a nice one. So merry again is another English word that has a long history. It goes back to Old English, in which it would have been pronounced something like merrier. So really hasn't diverged too much. It's an interesting that we've sort of settled on that. As you mentioned, the monarch, so the late Queen or the current King, we shall see, they tend not to say Merry Christmas. It does sort of have these slightly messy connotations to it. That if you have a Merry Christmas, it means it's a Christmas that's getting out of hand a bit. That's not really the case at all in terms of its history. It means more things like nice and joyous, peaceful. It's got a bit more serene in its early attestation. So we shouldn't be afraid to use the word merry. I will say that much. Why we've settled on it, that's a different issue, and I'm happy to say, kind of outside my remit. You'll need someone perhaps who works in sociolinguistics or psycholinguistics to tell you why we've settled on that particular phrase. But as you mentioned, other languages have settled on their alternative words. Perhaps as Christmas has become more widespread, like a bigger thing than it used to be in years gone by, perhaps also with sort of mass media where the same stock phrases are being spread around. I don't know, just speculating, but it is. I agree. It is interesting why we've focused on this particular adjective that we don't use that much beside Christmas.
So coming back to the Feliz Navidad, talking about as its sister word, Nativity.
Yeah.
Where do we get that from?
Yeah. So these are all to do with words meaning to be born. So in Latin, unsurprisingly, had a word or a verb that means to be born, I am born, which would have been something like nasci or gnasci in older Latin. And this, unsurprisingly, gives us a whole host of words. I say unsurprisingly, really, it's considering the influence of Latin and considering the importance of birth. So it's from this root that we get things like natal, prenatal, native as well. That's to do with your birth. Nation, it's the nation. It's the people that you are, born into. And among all of these, Spanish gets Navidad, the birth of Christ, over the border in France. French has Noel, which has some currency, I think, within Anglophone English-speaking cultures as an alternative. I think you can somewhat use Noel. It's in Christmas carols, for example. And then across another border in the mighty nation of Wales, it's Nadolig. Which again comes from Latin, that root all to do with the birth of Christ.
Yeah, I suppose that feeds into Natale with the Italian, and then also the name Natalie, which is born at Christmas.
Born at Christmas, there you go. So all a huge connections. English, as is often the case, is the bit of the odd one out in this with this particular word family. But yes, all sorts of words connected to specifically the birth. That's what the whole thing is about. That's the whole raison d'etre.
Oh, fantastic. I think, why are we the odd one out? Is this because of, Anglo-Saxons and then the Normans, and it's just a whole mix? Because we're not talking about the odd person, is it? This is a whole language that's been adopted.
Yeah, I mean, English is in so many ways the odd one out within a general context of Western Europe, and in many ways it's really not the odd one out. It does depend on what you're looking at, but it's true, it does follow its own trajectory. as a language, and that's unsurprising considering the unique historical events and the unique melting pot of people that have created the United Kingdom and the English language. So I'm not too surprised when very often English stands alone from a particular trend. It does have a unique history. A particular reason could be that people like the Angles and Saxons, these peoples that went into building up England, were something of a late arriver on the scene. You know, when they're coming into England, the Roman Empire's looking a bit peaky. Whereas you could say the Welsh have been here, been around since Roman times. Welsh has a huge influence from Latin. And you could say that maybe the different trajectory of English is because it arrives on the scene in different circumstances. And from that point onwards, it's following its own path.
No, that kind of makes sense. Because I do get guests on tours going, why is it so hard to learn English? And why is it this word and not that word? I'm like, I'm so not the person to ask.
I mean, even I would struggle with some questions. It breaks my heart sometimes. It is a tricky language to learn. I have taught English, and I have enormous respect for English learners. I really do.
One of the words that you mentioned was Noel. Used in a lot of our songs, and of course is also a name. There are other words that are quite predominant in some of the, especially Victorian Christmas carols. So like rejoice, for example, and that I suppose is linked with joy.
It is indeed.
Tell us a little bit more.
Well, no, so all of these words have a long, long association with Christmas. It is meant to be joyful. It is meant to be a celebration. And this goes back to our earliest sources for the celebration of Christmas. Words like joy, I believe, come from Latin gaudere, which is, it's a verb in Latin. It means to rejoice or to be glad. Wonderful, wonderful verb. And some specific sound changes have gone on. It's kind of gone through the mangle of French and become joie in modern French and joy in English. It's also present in another hymn, a hymn that is somewhat popular despite being sung in Latin. I should say that I love Latin, but it may not have broad appeal, which would be Gaudete. I forget. Yeah.
Oh, I love that one.
I know, me too.
Yes.
I know. It's a really, really old hymn. It's perhaps one of the oldest Christmas hymns that we have record for. And I love it. I love all sorts of versions of it. I forget which 80s band, I can't remember who covered it, but there is one particular...
We're both too young for that.
I do try to catch up, So it's a wonderful, wonderful hymn, and so surprisingly something a bit more modern, like the 19th century "Joy to the World" and "Gaudete," they share a theme, and they also share an etymological connection, which I find quite pleasing.
And when we're singing these, are we supposed to know these connections?
Oh no, that's fine. You don't need to know the connections to speak the language. That's not necessary at all. I will only say, for myself at least, it can be interesting to know them, and it can be very helpful. Not to set out my stall, but I'm a great believer, at least, that knowing the links between languages can also be very practically helpful for learning them. So if, for example, you're trying to tackle Latin, which I know is quite a task, appreciating that there's a connection between the English word joy and, say, the verb gaudere, which you may have to learn for whatever you're translating, it could be quite useful. So, you don't have to know them.
Another thing that we have, which you've pointed out, is the old Saint Nick. Everything's old, isn't it? Looking back in ye old times. Why are we so obsessed with old?
I don't know. I suppose it's because Christmas is a lot of traditions. Christmas is, it's a sort of an old time of year where we are reflecting back onto the year. In some cases, Christmas genuinely is old, where you have, for example, a feast day, the day in which you are particularly celebrating may have changed. So, for example, here, at least slowly in Western Europe before spreading out, we had a calendar change. Where we switched from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar, which led to a sort of a leap forward in time, and this led to an old Christmas day. There is an old Christmas day, which I suppose would have been would still be in January. This old Christmas day is still celebrated, for example, by a lot of Orthodox Christians. So people in Russia, Christmas is in for us and for them, the secular month of January. And I suppose also there's an island off the coast of Scotland, the really, really remote one. I think it's St Kilda, where they also, I suppose, keep this older date. The theory being that the news reached them very slowly about the new date. So, yeah, there is also an old Christmas day that you may choose to celebrate if you wish. A very pleasing collection, at least, is that this root old, this very, very core bit of vocabulary in English, is also present in the word world. That may sound a bit strange. You think of the world as being a very concrete thing, while the word old is a more abstract quality. But that's really to do with the history of this particular compound. World, once upon a time, had a much more metaphorical meaning. It was more to do with like existence and the lifespan of an individual. So this again goes back to Old English, in which world is something would have been pronounced something like weorold. If you wanted to be concrete, if you wanted to talk about the planet on which we stand, then that would be Middenjard, which you may recognise as Midgard.
I was going to say, it sounds very Lord of the Rings.
It does sound very well. Tolkien had to get it from somewhere. So that's Midgard in that way. So that's that specific place. And I mention this only because it's yet another very pleasing connection back to things like Joy to the World, where we have this word and there's old embedded into it.
Now, you said weorold.
Weorold would be something like the age of man, or the or man's lifespan, something like that.
It's big stuff, isn't it? It's heavy. This.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
very much so. Okay. But Old English poets loved this stuff.
Oh yes,
loved it.
Yes, I bet they did.
Couldn't get enough.
Now, there was one thing that I had to double take when I was reading one of your blog posts about the Magi. Now you get on your Christmas card, you see the three old wise men, but Magi has a rather magical meaning.
It does, yeah. Very nice choice of words there. Magi, or in the singular in Latin, it'd be something like magus, is the origin of magic. Which is a rather wonderful thing. So yes, the Magi in a magical time of year, it's all very suitable. This goes back all the way, I believe, to a Persian word. It's not especially clear, these biblical figures, the wise men, it's not especially clear where they're supposed to have come from. I think all that matters is that they come from very far away, which sort of highlights the significance of the event. Crossing the desert is no mean feat back in those days, still isn't. And I think this particular word that gets used for them has a Persian origin. It's all to do with sort of like wise men. It's like sages. You could say, philosopher would be another translation for them. And as well as giving us this particular very specific word for these biblical characters, it also does also give us the word magic through Greek and then through Latin and eventually down to English. So very appropriate.
Fantastic. I think does that then tie in with them doing the whole stargazing and that, didn't they? They predicted this and, suddenly when something comes true, I mean, that's got to be quite magical and quite powerful, hasn't it?
Exactly. No, they really were, and all of these different fields and ways of doing science would have been connected. So it's not as if it's not as if they had to perform magic. It's by virtue of themselves. They were learned, wise men, and they could do it all. So that's come down to us, at least in English, specifically for performance of the mystic arts. But at the time, they would have just been learned men, learned scholars, would have seen the stars, would have read the signs and read the portents correctly, and decided that this was it, and we better go.
Yeah. And then into history they were written.
Indeed.
Yeah, so for the listeners, you'll remember that the three wise men bring gifts to the baby Jesus, so gifts of gold, myrrh, and also frankincense. What is frankincense and what does it mean?
Frank, yes, it's a good point, actually. We kind of take these things for granted. I mean, gold, we're pretty clear on gold. We've got a vague idea about this. But you might expect, gold, silver, and bronze. These are three things that we understand quite well. But no, we have these three things. Frankincense is a substance. It's a naturally forming substance that I believe is used for burning and for therefore producing this nice smell. I think it's very specific about where it comes from, southern Arabia, although I might have to check that. And then hence you have this trade in these sort of precious substances up the Red Sea and into the Holy Land. So frankincense was a big deal. It was a very important thing. Not sure what it would have been called in the languages of that area at that time, but the English word at least goes back to French, so it's something like franc incense. It's incense. It's stuff that you burn, specifically sort of pure, or it's frank in the sense of very abundant and rich incense. So it's a good translation for whatever the original word was in the Greek and the Semitic languages. This is, again, extremely appropriate as a Christmassy word because incense may not be too surprising to learn that it goes back to incendere, which is a Latin word. It means to burn or to burn very well. That's the origin also of incendiary in English.
Yes, incendiary bombs.
Incendiary bombs, which unfortunately is something that London knows all too well about. So again, you can take it one step further and say that the kind of the underlying word in Latin is candere, which is just simply means to burn, and hence words in English like candle and candelabra and chandelier, all these kind of words as well. So very, very appropriate that we have frankincense, which is something nice that you burn, and candles, which is also something Christmassy and nice that you burn.
Oh, isn't that fantastic? I'd never made that connection before with the chandeliers and the candle.
Yeah,
and of course we have Advent candles as well, don't we?
We do have Advent candles, very appropriately. There's traditionally 4 of them in the Advent wreath, and then an extra one for the great day itself. And again, talk about a word with lots of connections. Wow, Advent, huge. By virtue of its Latin origin. So in the same way that frankincense, we can say, has this sort of this Latin verb at its heart, Advent does as well, and it's a super important one. It's venire, or venire, depending on your preferred pronunciation of Latin, and that means to come or to arrive somewhere. So super important. I mean, as you can imagine, that's a pretty basic bit of vocabulary in most languages. By framing it in those terms, perhaps you can think of other connections start to appear. I mean, words like adventure, for example, also is about coming to places.
Or linking it back to the Christmas, you've got the Advent calendar as well. And
yes.
Of course, Fortnum and Mason's, each Christmas is made into the biggest Advent calendar, and each window has a door with a number on. And then, of course, when it hits the 7th of December, the 7 lights up. And someone asked me on my Christmas lights walk this week, actually, what does Advent mean? And I automatically I said, oh, it's counting down to. But I thought, is that just a reaction, or is that something I knew and have been able to remember it?
I think that's the general sense.
What does Advent mean?
Yeah, it means arrival. Really, it's about the arrival, or the, if you would, arrival, not in terms of like these, like the finished act, but more like the anticipation, like it's still ongoing. When we have Advent, which again was another Latin word, adventus, is more to do with the arrival, or the coming, in the sense of a long process. So Advent is a sort of spiritual time where we look forward to the coming of Jesus. That's both in the sort of the historical sense, where real time is counting down, but also in the sort of spiritual sense. Christianity is very much about Jesus Christ entering into people's lives, and Advent is when you anticipate that, you look forward to it. So yeah, it's the arrival.
So you talked about Jesus coming into people's lives. Well, what about a jolly old fellow who comes into people's houses on Christmas Eve?
Yes, indeed. Santa Claus.
Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Now, our red and white outfitted guy is thanks to the marketing department of Coca-Cola. But he is older than that, isn't he?
Mm-hmm. He really is, although it's only fair to say that he's a man with multiple genealogies. He is, the product of different cultures, and he's quite a man with a fairly complex history. And you can see this in the name itself, and you especially the different names for this particular figure, this very real figure, of course, in different languages and in different, say, dialects of the same language. He is, at least for me, being British, he's still Father Christmas. Santa Claus is something that I acknowledge, but nonetheless, he's first and foremost Father Christmas. And I think that's not a trivial point, because Santa Claus, which is really it dominates in America, is connected to the specific ingredients that went into the United States of America. As many people know, Santa Claus is from Sinterklaas, is Saint Nicholas, but through Dutch. That's the thing. And Dutch, through the Dutch presence in sort of northeast, in the northeast USA.
New York State.
New York State, absolutely, which used to be New Amsterdam. Has continued to exert a very distinct influence on North American English, and then North American English has then spread out, and hence why, despite the fact that we in the UK are geographically much closer to the Netherlands and to Dutch, bizarrely we again get this word and this term that has a Dutch origin coming from the West into the UK, thanks to the Americans. So, it's an interesting sort of Santa Claus and Father Christmas, how it's a sign of the different histories of these two great Englishes.
Linking back to what we were saying before about old, and we call him Old Saint Nick. He's been with us from the beginning.
He has. He really is. He is Old Saint Nick, which I think is a delightful name as well. So yeah, it's great, and you can read a lot into it as well. It may go perhaps underappreciated, but Dutch, this language of Europe, has had quite an effect on the vocabulary of English. Multiple reasons why that may be. Geography is one, and the fact that all the Christmas traditions are forming really within the medieval period, where, at least in Western Europe, Dutch speakers they're kind of on the up. Thanks to trade, for example, speakers of Dutch and Low German, that's not German, that's Low German, a sort of separate language spoken in what's now northern Germany. This single language is the speakers of that language are doing enormously well for themselves, thanks to things like the Hanseatic League, this great trading network that's spreading their trade and goods and language around the North and Baltic seas. So in that regard, it's no wonder that we have this Dutch influence creeping in. Not only do we have the Dutch to thank for Santa Claus, they've also given us things like sled and sleigh, which makes sense. It's a fairly watery country, so it makes sense that this is going to freeze over and they're going to have some way of getting around during winter. And also for older listeners, brandy. Brandy is Wonderwein. It's burnt wine in Dutch. It's like a sort of a former compound that's been squished into just brandy. So, yeah, we've got a lot to thank them for.
And I must admit, I do drink a bit more brandy at Christmas than any other time of year. I think it's the law, isn't it?
It is the law, and it goes into the cooking, you know?
Of course it
Yeah,
does. The alcohol's burnt off.
exactly. I mean, you've already got it out anyway.
And I suppose that links to the rather bizarre drink of eggnog.
Eggnog. I know. I'm not a fan, I have to admit. Eggnog is...
No, it's a texture for me, just puts me off.
Agreed.
But where does of the egg is a bit obvious, but where's the noggin come from?
A very good question, and with no easy answer, I have to say. This whole field of etymology, it's sometimes it can produce fairly unsatisfactory answers. Some words just defy easy derivation, easy kind of a speculation about where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
From the record, at least, from the record of all the English dialects and accents and things that have been collated over time, it seems to have a East Anglian origin. So shout out to East Anglia, that's where I'm from, the proud county of Norfolk. And nog seems to be some sort of strong alcoholic drink, probably beer. It doesn't sound very pleasant to be mixing egg and beer, but maybe this is a word that sort of lost its beery connotations and has come to mean just, spirit or alcoholic drink in general, and then becomes eggnog with the addition of egg. I think that's the idea, but it's a curious drink with a curious etymology.
It is, isn't it? There's a pub in Mayfair called the Last Footman. And he was literally the last footman in Mayfair, and he had a cane, and the cane itself had a bulbous head, silver bulbous head, and when you opened that head of the cane, he had strong wine, and also the other compartment had egg whites.
Wow!
And so I'm kind of thinking now, was this a DIY egg wob? Because he's basically running in front of the horse and carriage. He's over 6 foot tall, he's showing that his master's on the way. And then when his master goes for dinner or whatever, he can't just, it's like a chauffeur, isn't it? You have to sit and wait. So his sustenance is this fortified wine and egg whites.
Wow. Oh, wow. What a drink. What a character as well.
And for someone that's 6 foot, you need calories, don't you?
You do.
Running.
You do, particularly.
So maybe it was his version of an eggnog there as well.
Wow. That's a wonderful story. God, what rich history of London. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? So we had brandy, which obviously then goes with brandy sauce on the Christmas puddings. And the mince pies. And then we have brandy cream as well. Mm-hmm. What about the word cream in itself? Is that...
I mean, it's a great word. It's a word that, despite the fairly humble substance of cream, it's a word with very lofty origins. It is, in fact, derived from ancient Greek via Latin and via French, and all those extra steps may show why it's been a bit muddled and a bit altered over history. But it goes back to ancient Greek chrisma, which is chrism. It's chrism. It's the stuff that you use in baptisms and coronations, and it's what you use to anoint people. And this is a kind of a drastic, I think, example of some sort of abasement or devaluation of the word, where despite this substance with very specific purposes, it seems to have diminished over time to just mean sort of fatty liquid. Fatty substance, and then cream specifically, i.e. the milk-based substance, what you get from cows. So the interesting story. I mean, that does happen. Words can be heightened. They can be made much more positive and much more much loftier in their meaning, but the opposite can happen too. And this is wonderful. It's very appropriate that we should be consuming cream in Christmas in whatever form you choose, because, well, we have chrisma, which is this ancient Greek word. That's the stuff that you anoint with. That's the noun because of the ma ending. The verb itself is chrio, I anoint or I smear. Second meaning not quite so not quite so nice, but it's the stuff that you anoint with, and it unsurprisingly it goes back to that verb. Now, past participle, the form of the verb, the one who is anointed, the one who has been anointed, is Christos, Christ. So cream and Christ bizarrely have this connection through their shared Greek origin. So Jesus Christ, as people may well know, the Jesus is the name. That's a personal human name, a fairly common one. In the 1st century AD in that part of the Middle East. Christ is more like a title or an epithet. He's Christos. He's the anointed one, the one who has this special status from God. It's actually a translation, or perhaps an approximation of a Hebrew word. The Hebrew word itself may also be fairly familiar to people. Meshiach, the Messiah. So again, we've got the anointed ones coming in. So cream, Christ, Messiah. There you go. Welcome to the world of etymology.
That's fantastic.
It's great. It's really great. I can't take any credit. It's all language, not me.
No, you've said it so well. That actually makes so much sense. Thank you, Danny. I think we've had a wonderful adventure. Here we go. I'm going to add these words in for the Christmas now. Of course, we've got the candles, we've got the cream, we've got the word Christmas as well, and of course this essence of joy and celebration. Which is, of course, I suppose, the main part of Christmas now. We don't focus on the doom and the gloom and everything's dark and cold outside. We want to spend time with our loved ones in a joyous way. Mm-hmm. So, Danny, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I relished this opportunity to share these little word facts. I don't normally need such a setting and such an excuse. They normally just come out anyway. So this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
No, brilliant. And if you're wanting to listen to more Christmassy episodes, then episode number 98, Christmas Puddings Through History, with the wonderful Paul Couchman, the Regency cook. Also, episode 75, The Christmas Cracker, a Victorian invention. Episode 74, Christmas in the 1950s and 1960s. What were they drinking at Christmas then? And where did people buy their Christmas trees in London? Episode 35 covers a Tudor Christmas, looking at some of the Christmas traditions that we know now and others that have faded through time. And also, episode 34, I would encourage you to listen to. This is London's oldest shops for food and drink and their lovely ideas for yummy Christmas presents. And now is the time to bid farewell for 2022. Thank you so much for joining me this year. And we will restart our London History podcast in February 2023 because I have a little book I need to finish. That's all for now. Have a very Merry Christmas and a healthy and happy New Year.